was a kid, I loved to play video games, and that meant the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, one of my favorite games, The Legend of Zelda. The point of the game was for Link to collect all of the pieces of the Triforce. Well, eventually it looked like this. What does that have to do with public speaking? We're gonna find out.
I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is. Yes.
Okay, so The Legend of Zelda may not be the perfect analogy for public speaking, but when we talk about our general purpose, we're going to use that same symbol. 3 triangles and a larger one. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to define the 3 general purposes of a public speech, identify situations in which each purpose is appropriate, and finally select the appropriate general purpose for your speech. And that's quite important as we get into public speaking and more in-depth speeches, like informative speeches or persuasive speeches, which brings me to the 3 general purposes. Now, let me be clear about this. There are only 3 general purposes. When you're thinking about it, there are only 3 options. 1, 2, 3. Not 1, 2, 5, 3, sir. No, 3. 1, 2, 3. And here they are. The first one is to inform. The second is to persuade. And the third is to entertain. These are the only 3 options you have. There are 1, 2, 5, 3, sir, 3. 1, 2, 3. To inform, to persuade, to entertain. Let's talk about what each of those means individually, starting with the first one, to inform. The goal of an informative speech is to share information with the audience that they don't already know. Your job is to tell them something new, give them some new information, but not necessarily give them anything to do with it. Just tell them new information. The second part, though, is to offer an effective, strong position on whatever topic you're presenting. So whatever you're talking about, you need to have some position on it. You might not be fully persuading them, but you are in some way giving them a position. You have a position. And then finally, support every statement that you make with clear and credible evidence. This means citing sources. This means providing more than just you talking out of wherever you like to talk out of. That's the first one, to inform. The second general purpose that our speech can take on is to persuade. And that's the purpose of persuading the audience is to change opinions, beliefs, or behaviors of the audience members. When you are trying to persuade somebody, you are trying to change something in their life. You are trying to make them think differently about whatever it is you're talking about, whether that be changing what they feel is right or wrong or good or bad, maybe trying to convince them that one thing is better than another, maybe you're trying to convince them that something that we are doing in society is wrong, or maybe you're trying to get them to do something differently in their life. Again, you're providing an ethical perspective on whatever stated position it is. Ethics are important in informative speaking. They are even more so in persuasive speaking because the central goal is to change somebody's mind. Now, the last part about that is the same as informative speeches. Whatever you say has to be supported with clear, credible, and effective evidence. That's absolutely vital and absolutely essential in persuasive speaking. And then we get to the last one, to entertain. Entertaining speeches are fun. They're very challenging. Your goal is to set a light, responsive, and comfortable mood. When you're speaking to entertain, you're not trying to change beliefs, attitudes, values, or behaviors. You're not trying to give them new information. You're trying to make things comfortable. You're trying to make people happy. You are typically engaging the audience through some form of narrative. That means you're telling them a story. You're connecting with them in some way that feels good, that feels like they can relate to you. And finally, you are creating a comfortable rapport with the audience. Now, rapport is important in all of these general purposes, but when you are giving a speech to entertain, you're talking about speeches that are intended to create that natural comfort between you and the audience. And that brings us to all 3 of them, to inform, to persuade, to entertain. Now let me talk a little bit about how this applies to your speech. In subsequent speeches, we're going to talk about how to write a strong thesis statement, or you might have already gotten that. But right now, I want to show you the difference between the three. If we start thinking, maybe I'm gonna write a speech about American culture. Now, there's a lot of ways we can go with it, and I've just chosen three pretty quick and specific ways to approach American culture in a public speech. But the first direction that we could take is an informative direction. And that might be something like, Americans are fiercely independent compared to many other nations. I'm not trying to change attitudes, beliefs, values, behaviors. All I'm trying to do is prove a point, that Americans are fiercely independent compared to other nations. And that's something that sets us apart. It's new information. Informative speeches are typically when you have an audience that's simply looking for more information, like delivering a research presentation. You're not trying to convince everybody that you're right. Most people give you the benefit of the doubt that you are credible, but you are trying to share the new information that you've found. When we get to the persuasive level, we can take this same topic of American culture, but we can say something like, American culture is the greatest in the world. At this point, we are trying to change attitudes, beliefs, values, or behaviors. We're trying to convince people about their values, good or bad. What is good or bad? Is this truly the best? Persuasive speeches are when you have an audience that disagrees with you. You are trying to change their mind. You're trying to change something about them. And then we get to the entertaining speech. Now, we can use this same topic of American culture, but we can talk about it in a way that Americans are just stupid Canadians. Now, whether you agree with that or not is not the point. The point is, I can have a lot of fun with that. I can talk about how when you get up into the north, it becomes really clear because northern Michiganders talk a lot like Canadians. So do Minnesotans. Minnesotans have a lot of Canadian, but it's not exactly the same. We're just stupid Canadians. You can go a long way with that. You can have a lot of fun with it, but it's not anything. I'm not truly trying to change your attitudes, beliefs, values, or behaviors. I'm just trying to make some jokes, make people laugh. Now, the last thing I want to do is go through the general purpose, and bring it back to the Legend of Zelda. Remember, I talked about the Triforce. So let's start first with a triangle. And on this triangle, we are going to put the three general purposes, starting with to inform, then we've got to persuade, or to entertain, and we close with to persuade. I want you to think about the topic that you choose or the thesis statement that you're working with as being on a continuum between all of these three. What I mean by that is when you are giving a speech to inform, you have naturally some level of persuasion because whatever perspective you're taking is influenced by what you believe and what you see, and that bleeds through. Your bias bleeds through. So all communication at some level has some amount of persuasion in it. Your goal is just to share new information. So if you give a speech to inform, you want to stay somewhere in that to inform, to entertain, or to inform and to persuade. Again, like I mentioned with to inform, with the speech to inform, your goal is at some point to create this rapport with the audience. You want that rapport, so you want to be somewhat entertaining. What you want to avoid is the no-no spot. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So we've got that topic, that informative topic. You want it somewhere in that green triangle. You want it somewhere between to inform and to entertain, and then you want it somewhere between to persuade and to inform. But you want to stay in that green triangle. If you go into that no-no spot, the audience gets confused. Same thing, if you're giving a speech to entertain, you want to stay somewhere between to entertain and to persuade. I mentioned that comical routine about Americans being just stupid Canadians. Obviously, there could be a lot of political undercurrent in that, but that's not my goal. My goal is not to persuade you. My goal is to entertain you. Like I said, my bias is going to come through, but at the same time, I have to tell you new jokes. I have to give you new material. Hearing the same jokes over and over again, the jokes stop becoming funny. Likewise, when I'm attempting to persuade you, I have to give you new information. I have to tell you something you don't already know. If you think about talking to somebody who smokes, You could show them all the pictures of dirty lungs. You can show them all of the evidence. They've heard it all before. You have to show them something new if you are planning to change their mind. But what you want to stay far, far away from is the no-no spot. If you end up in that no-no spot, what that means is you're too informative to be persuasive or too persuasive to be informative, and it's hard for the audience to know what it is that they're supposed to do with your information. If you are too entertaining and if you're trying to give an informative speech and you're too entertaining, or if you're trying to persuade people but you're too entertaining, it's hard for the audience to trust you and to believe you. It's hard for them to give you credibility. Likewise, if you're trying to entertain them but you give them too much factual information, too much informative, they get bored and it's not as entertaining anymore. So the reason you choose a general purpose is so that you can put that focus on your content. And here we are. You should be able to define the 3 purposes in a public speech, identify situations in which each purpose is appropriate, and select the best general purpose for your speech. And that brings me to the end. This is the first step in writing your speech. And once you get that general purpose down, you can lead into your specific purpose and finally into your thesis. There's more lectures to come, and I will see you on the flip side.